For thousands of years, people have looked toward the night sky for comfort, guidance, and wonder. But imagine living in a world without electricity. The moon is bright, the night is calm. Then, slowly, something begins to change. A dark shadow moves across the moon. The familiar silver light fades, and then the moon turns red, deep red, sometimes copper-colored, sometimes orange, sometimes the color of old blood. To a modern observer, a lunar eclipse is a natural and predictable event. Science can explain why it happens. Astronomers can calculate the exact moment it will begin and end. But for people in earlier centuries, the sudden transformation of the moon could feel like something very different. It could feel like a warning, a sign, a message from heaven, or perhaps something far more mysterious. So why did people fear what we now call a blood moon? The answer lies not in one single belief, but in centuries of stories, religious interpretations, folk traditions, fears, and attempts to understand a sky that seemed alive with meaning. And in the United States and the United Kingdom, some of those old ideas still survive today, not always as literal beliefs, but as stories, symbols, and echoes of the past. Because even in the modern world, when the moon turns red, people still stop, look up, and wonder. The name blood moon itself is powerful. It immediately creates an emotional image. Blood can symbolize danger, sacrifice, death, conflict, or transformation. So when people saw the moon suddenly take on a reddish color, it is understandable that the sight could inspire fear. Historically, people did not always have one shared explanation for such an event. In earlier societies, the sky was often seen as deeply connected to life on Earth. The sun and moon were not simply distant objects. They could be understood through religious or symbolic ideas. Changes in the heavens could be interpreted as warnings about events below. A normal full moon was familiar, but an eclipse changed that familiar object before people's eyes. And human beings have always been uneasy when something expected suddenly becomes strange. Imagine standing outside centuries ago and watching the moon darken. There is no observatory, no smartphone alert, no scientific live stream. No voice calmly saying, "This is caused by the Earth passing between the sun and the moon." Instead, there is only silence, a changing sky, and a question. Why is this happening now? That question opened the door to ancient fears. In the history of the British Isles, the moon carried strong symbolic importance in folklore and traditional belief. For generations, the moon was associated with the rhythms of life. People watched its phases. They connected it with planting, weather, fishing, fertility, sleep, and the passing of time. Folk traditions often gave the moon a personality of its own. It could seem watchful, mysterious, sometimes benevolent, sometimes dangerous. And when something as important as the moon changed dramatically, it could easily be interpreted as a sign that the natural order had been disturbed. Across parts of Britain, old folk beliefs connected unusual events in the sky with unusual events on Earth. A strange-looking moon might be discussed as a possible warning of bad weather, hardship, political trouble, or misfortune. These should be understood as historical folk beliefs and superstitions, not established facts. But they reveal something important about the past. People were trying to make sense of uncertainty. The sky became a kind of symbolic language. And when the moon turned red, people could imagine that the heavens were speaking. Some old British beliefs were especially concerned with the color of the moon. A red or unusually colored moon could create anxiety because red was already associated with powerful human emotions and experiences: fire, war, blood, anger, danger. So a reddish moon could become symbolically connected with troubling events. There was also a long tradition of interpreting signs in nature. Storm clouds, comets, unusual animal behavior, strange sounds, and changes in the heavens. To modern people, these events may be unrelated, but in earlier worldviews, the universe could feel interconnected. A disturbance in the sky might suggest a disturbance in human affairs, and that is one reason eclipses could become associated with omens. Not necessarily because everyone believed disaster would follow, but because a rare and dramatic event seemed too important to be meaningless. The word omen itself carries a feeling of mystery. An omen is not simply a prediction. It is a sign that people believe may point towards something beyond ordinary understanding. And throughout British history and folklore, unusual celestial events could be interpreted in this way. A blood moon could therefore become a canvas for human fear. If a community was already worried about war, a red moon might be remembered as a warning. If disease or famine followed a strange celestial event, people might later connect the two. This is something humans have often done throughout history. We search for patterns, especially after something frightening happens. A red moon appears. Then, months later, misfortune arrives. The human mind remembers the dramatic connection. The moon becomes part of the story. And over time, that story becomes folklore. Eventually, the question changes. Instead of asking, what happened after the eclipse, people begin asking, what did the eclipse mean? And that is how ancient fears can survive for generations. Across the Atlantic, early beliefs in what would become the United States were also influenced by European traditions, especially those brought from Britain. Early colonial communities carried religious ideas, folk traditions, and old superstitions into a new and unfamiliar land. For some deeply religious communities, extraordinary events in the heavens could be interpreted through a spiritual lens. A dramatic eclipse might lead people to reflect on divine power, human mortality, judgment, or the uncertain future. Again, these were historical interpretations, not scientific conclusions. But they mattered because the sky was emotionally powerful. In the early American imagination, nature could feel vast and unpredictable. Dark forests stretched beyond settlements. Storms arrived suddenly. Disease could spread without modern medical understanding. Life itself could change quickly. In such a world, a blood moon was not merely something to photograph. It could become part of a much larger spiritual experience. A reminder that human beings were small beneath an enormous universe. Religious beliefs also played an important role in how some people historically understood eclipses. Certain biblical passages contain powerful images involving the moon appearing as blood or the heavens changing dramatically. These passages have, at different times, been interpreted symbolically, spiritually, prophetically, or in other ways depending on religious tradition. For some believers, the image of a blood-red moon became connected with themes of divine power, judgment, the end of an age, or major spiritual change. But it is important to distinguish between religious interpretation and astronomical explanation. Historically, some people understood celestial imagery literally, others understood it symbolically, and many modern believers interpret such passages in different ways. The image itself, however, remains powerful. A moon that looks like blood can seem to bring an ancient sacred text to life. And that emotional connection helps explain why blood moons still fascinate people today. There is another reason eclipses could inspire fear. They seemed to violate the rules of nature. The moon was supposed to shine. Then suddenly it darkened. Human beings tend to feel secure when the world behaves predictably. Morning follows night. The seasons return. The moon changes gradually. But an eclipse feels different. It is temporary, yet dramatic. It can make the familiar suddenly unfamiliar. And for ancient observers, that temporary transformation could seem almost supernatural. The object that guided travelers and illuminated the darkness was suddenly changed. What if it did not return? What if the red color meant something had happened to the moon itself? What if the heavens were angry? What if the world had entered a dangerous moment? These questions may sound strange today, but without modern astronomy, they were understandable human responses to a frightening sight. Folklore often grows from moments exactly like this. A village sees something unusual. People create an explanation. Parents tell the story to children. The story changes slightly with each generation, and eventually the original event becomes surrounded by mystery. In Britain, and later in parts of the American world influenced by British traditions, the moon became connected with sayings, weather lore, lucky and unlucky times, and warnings about change. Some traditions advised people to pay close attention to unusual moons. Others treated the moon as a symbol of transformation. And that symbolism makes perfect sense. During an eclipse, the moon appears to become something else. Silver becomes shadow, shadow becomes red. Then, slowly, the familiar moon returns. This transformation can be frightening, but it can also be deeply symbolic. And perhaps this is why the blood moon has never disappeared from the human imagination. In modern America and the United Kingdom, most people no longer fear a lunar eclipse in the same literal way that some earlier communities may have feared strange signs in the sky. We know the astronomical reason behind the reddish color. We can predict eclipses years in advance. We can watch them live online. And yet, the fascination remains. Why? Because science can explain how the moon turns red, but human imagination still asks what the experience means to us. That is where the modern blood moon becomes interesting. Today, some people see it as a symbol of transformation. Others see it as a reminder that even familiar things can change. Some connect it with spiritual reflection. Others simply admire its beauty. Photographers chase it. Families gather outside to watch it. Social media fills with images of a red moon hanging over cities, churches, castles, and quiet landscapes. The fear may have changed, but the sense of awe remains. Perhaps that is the real secret behind the blood moon. Ancient people were not necessarily afraid of astronomy. They were afraid of uncertainty, and uncertainty still exists, even now. We may understand the mechanics of an eclipse, but we still live in a world where sudden change can make us uneasy. A blood moon reminds us of that strange human feeling. We can know something is natural and still feel that it is mysterious. We can understand the science and still be moved by the sight. We can reject ancient superstition and still feel a chill when the familiar moon turns dark red. That does not mean the old omens were true. It means the human imagination is powerful. In a symbolic sense, the blood moon can represent something that disappears without truly being lost. The moon enters darkness. Its appearance changes. For a time, it seems unfamiliar, but eventually it returns. Perhaps that is why some people today see the eclipse as a symbol of transformation rather than disaster. Darkness is not always the end. Change is not always destruction. Sometimes something familiar must pass through shadow before it becomes visible again. The ancient world saw fear in the blood moon. The religious world sometimes saw powerful spiritual imagery. Folklore saw warnings and mysteries. And the modern world sees science, photography, curiosity, and symbolism. Yet all of these reactions begin with the same moment. A person looks up at the night sky and sees the moon transformed. So why do people fear the blood moon? Historically, because a red moon could appear to be a sign that the normal order of the universe had been interrupted. Old British folklore connected unusual signs in nature with uncertainty and possible misfortune. Early American religious communities sometimes viewed extraordinary events in the heavens through powerful spiritual and biblical imagery. Stories passed through generations. Omens became folklore. Folklore became tradition. And tradition became fascination. Today, We do not need to believe that a blood moon predicts disaster to understand why our ancestors were captivated by it. We only need to imagine standing in the darkness, without modern explanations, watching the moon slowly lose its light, and then seeing it return in red. For a moment, the sky would not look ordinary. It would look like a message. And perhaps that is why, even now, centuries after many ancient fears began to fade, the blood moon still has power over the human imagination. Not because it controls our future, not because every old omen must come true, but because it reminds us of something very old within us. The part of us that still looks at the sky, sees something beautiful and unfamiliar, and whispers, "What does it mean?"